Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution and US made advanced weapons. They in the hands of the cartel. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, we covered this a little bit last year. But now it's back in the headlines. CIA, we know what y'all doing. But this is a slap in the face to Trump. You said these people were terrorists. You just said the cartel was terrorists. Why is Zelensky and the Ukraine army, along with the CIA help, giving these terrorists, revolutionary salute, Shalom Queen, giving these terrorists our advanced weapons? This is very dangerous, y'all.
A darker crisis is unfolding in Ukraine. American weapons meant for Ukrainian troops have allegedly landed in the hands of Mexican drug cartels. This next report explains how a perfect storm of corruption threatens both Ukraine's survival.
This should be all over fake news. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to let y'all know that the fentanyl pushers, the Mexican drug cartel, the poisoners of our communities, the Mexican drug cartels, that they now have advanced weapons, and they don't like that a lot of illegals have been thrown out this country. They got a lot of hate in their heart. But now they have these advanced weapons to carry out terrorism. This is a very serious situation.
And U.S. border security.
Zelensky should be arrested and tried in the U.S. for this.
Russia's relentless assault continues to devastate Ukraine's infrastructure with missiles from the Black Sea.
The Mexican drug cartels, I know the U.S. military don't want to fight them boys with them drones. They don't want to because drone warfare has changed warfare. Drone warfare would devastate the U.S. Army right now by a cartel using those drones the proper way, smash tanks. That's real talk. Smash command and control centers. This is not a game that the Ukrainians have gave the Mexican drug cartels weapons, and they have taught them how to use those drones as weapons of war. But we know the CIA is behind all of this shit.
Targeting Kyiv and other regions. Each day brings news of fresh Russian territorial gains, while Ukrainian troops face critical ammunition shortages. Along the Pokrovsk front, Ukrainian forces struggle against Russian infantry assaults, their defense compromised by severe manpower shortages. Desertion rates climb as exhausted soldiers flee a depleted, demoralized military. Behind the visible crisis, a more insidious threat emerges. Ukrainian authorities launched desperate raids across 1,000 locations. Uncovering vast networks of illegal arms sales. Trophy weapons, ammunition, and explosives meant for defenders instead disappear into shadowy markets. The corruption cases aren't isolated. Several high-ranking Ukrainian officials have been arrested in corruption cases. Now, American journalist Tucker Carlson's explosive revelation suggests these weapons now arm Mexican drug cartels. This unprecedented security breach not only undermines Ukraine's defense, but threatens America's southern border. This crisis strikes at the heart of Western support, with President Zelensky rushing to Munich for crucial.
That's what the CIA want. They got to keep them drugs flowing. It's $100 billion market for the CIA. They can't let nobody close their border, even if they got to make the cartel very powerful to make sure they can get that crap in here. Make sure they can continue their terrorism and the poison of our communities.
Crucial meetings with Trump administration officials, these allegations threaten to derail vital military aid. Ukraine faces a devastating choice: tackle internal corruption or lose the war against Russia. The ramifications extend far beyond Ukraine's borders. These weapons, intended to defend European democracy, now potentially fuel cartel violence along the US Mexico border. Each diverted weapon represents a dual threat, weakening Ukraine's defense while strengthening criminal enterprises abroad. Bureau Report, We On, World is One.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis is a military expert and host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. He's now joining us live from Starling, Virginia. Colonel Davis, good to see you. We have seen multiple reports and arrests of high-profile Ukrainian officials. How big do you think corruption is in Ukraine?
Oh, I think it's just gargantuan. I mean, you know, the Ukraine government and country was regarded as the number one most corrupt country in Europe before the war started. And you can be sure that after flooding it with so many, literally billions of dollars, and you've had Zelensky himself admit that he doesn't know where $100 billion of that went. And it's anybody's guess to where it was, but there are way too many reports of high-ranking people that were, jailed, that were under investigation, that to think that this is not something even more widespread, and it is a real problem. No question about it.
Before I move on to my next question, I just want to know from you, do you believe in Tucker Carlson's statement or depiction that the weapons are landing in drug smugglers' hands?
Well, it certainly could. He said when I was on that show with him, and he said that it was a fact, is the phrase he used. He said he had direct knowledge of it, and I know Tucker Carlson is incredibly well connected. So if that's what he said, I'm sure that there's some truth to it. I just personally, I have not seen those sources, and I don't have any personal knowledge of it.
All right. With that being said, does the weapons smuggling from Ukraine complicate further aid from its Western partners, especially the US?
Well, you know, I think it does. And as your reporter showed there a second ago, I mean, whether there's something going to the Mexican border is a separate issue, but we know for a fact that it's a massive problem inside of Ukraine, as those 1,000 raids showed. And you can be sure.
Well, it's a problem in Africa. Zelensky not only is training Al-Qaeda and ISIS to fight in Burkina Faso, wherever they can find Russia, and Russia is helping the African nations, training ISIS in Syria, Ukraine. This is a big scandal too that's going to come out, that they gave Ukrainian our money and our advanced weapons, and what did they do with it? We gave it to terrorists and armed bandits, because Ukraine is corrupt, but so is everybody who's been dealing with them.
If there were 1,000 places they knew about, there's probably thousands more that they don't know about. So this is obviously quite a big issue, and anybody in Europe is going to have to take serious look at this, because why do you want to continue to give large amounts of weapons, ammunition, aid, etc. to Ukraine when they cannot control where it's going? Because whether it's in Mexico or not is, we'll find out. But the likelihood is that it's going in other places that could be crime in European countries. And I think that's what's going to motivate a lot of their future. Anybody who's going to give more aid is going to want some real guardrails on this, or they may, reconsider whether they should give weapons at all.
Colonel Davis, it's always good to talk to you.
US journalist Tucker Carlson has claimed that a significant portion of the weapons Washington has provided to Kyiv as military aid in its conflict with Russia ends up in the hands of America's actual enemies, including Mexican drug cartels. Up to half of the weapons sent by the US to Ukraine end up on international black markets, the former Fox News host said on February 10th during an interview with retired US Army Lieutenant Colonel and Iraq and Afghanistan veteran Daniel Davis. The Ukrainian military is selling a huge percentage, up to half, of the arms that we send them. I know this for a fact, Carlson claimed, without disclosing his sources or providing specific evidence. Since 2022, the US Congress has authorized approximately $175 billion in aid for Ukraine. However, a large portion of that funding has reportedly been allocated to American industries and other US government activities related to the conflict. In January, US President Donald Trump claimed that Washington had spent $200 billion more than the EU on aid to Kyiv. Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky later stated that Kyiv had received just over $75 billion in military and other forms of assistance from Washington, adding that he had no idea where Trump's estimate of $200 billion originated or where it could have vanished. Meanwhile, Moscow has repeatedly warned that the unchecked supply of Western weapons to Ukraine has led to a large number of arms falling into the hands of organized criminal groups and extremists worldwide. Western media outlets and officials have also acknowledged that weapons supplied to Kyiv have ended up in criminal hands. In April 2022, Europol reported that its investigations indicated weapons were being trafficked out of Ukraine and into the EU to supply organized crime groups.
This is what the CIA wanted. You see, Ukraine was just a weapon and money laundering pit. Going in the front door, going out the back door, it's washed now. The money has been laundered. The weapons have been laundered. This is a gift for the CIA. Now Ukraine could ship them weapons to all of their terrorist groups all over the world. That's trained by the CIA. Everybody who has been attacking the enemies of America is getting these weapons. But now these weapons is on our border because that's what the Zionists, the small head, want. I told you they want the fall of America. And for anybody, that one person tell me, this U.S. military, what those little weapons going to be able to do? Well, you have no idea about drone warfare and what their cartels can do to the U.S. with those fucking drones.
Groups. In October 2022, the Finnish authorities stated that weapons originally sent to Kiev had surfaced in the country and were acquired by local criminals.
Anti-tank
At the
weapons.
time, similar
bring
reports
down
emerged from
airplanes.
Sweden,
All that.
Denmark, and the Netherlands. In June 2024, Spanish media reported that criminal gangs in southern Spain had obtained modern military-grade weapons allegedly smuggled from Ukraine.
I know they saying the Mexican drug cartels, but a bunch of these neo-Nazis, white supremacists in America, they got their hands on the motherfucking weapons too. Oh, yeah, they got their hands on some hardcore shit that they couldn't get their hands on. But now they came out the U.S. inventory and made their way back to the, through the black market where anybody can buy an anti-tank weapon and all that. You think them people ain't got that shit now?
Meanwhile,
Civil
the
War.
United States military has significantly ramped up its surveillance of Mexican drug cartels over the past 2 weeks. Open source flight data and information from US officials reveal
Everybody
at
got
least
it but us.
18 spy plane missions conducted over the southwestern US and international airspace near Mexico's Baja Peninsula. This escalation, described as unprecedented by current and former military officials, comes as President Donald Trump directs the military to secure the border and disrupt cartel operations. Historically, the Pentagon conducted just one surveillance mission per month along the
This is the Pentagon.
US-Mexico border.
This is the Pentagon fighting the CIA. That's all this is. This us versus us. That's disgusting. This Donald Trump and the Pentagon finna try to secure the border. Against who? The CIA? Oh, the CIA done made sure that they people got advanced weapons, so they ready for this war now. That's crazy.
Instead, intelligence gathering efforts typically focused on geopolitical threats like Russian activity in Ukraine or Chinese submarine movements. However, with Trump declaring a national emergency at the southern border, the US military has begun shifting its national security focus. Since Trump's inauguration on January 20th, the US has carried out at least 11 surveillance missions using the Navy P-8 Poseidon aircraft. These planes, designed for anti-submarine warfare, also possess advanced intelligence gathering capabilities, including high-resolution imagery and signals interception. In a rare move, a U-2 spy plane, one of the most iconic reconnaissance aircraft from the Cold War, was deployed on February 3rd for a nearly 6-hour mission. This is the first known use of a U-2 in operations targeting Mexican cartels.
Oh, yeah. See, they know what they got. See, they didn't want to tell American citizens. And remember, this ain't, we're not seeing this on our news. No, other news stations around the world are talking about this, but not our media. You see, the military know damn well they're not flying them advanced planes just to see what the smuggling route is. They already know that. Now they're trying to see where the fuck is those advanced weapons they got from those neo-Nazis in Ukraine and what type of danger is the Americans really in. That's what they're trying to find out.
Additionally, an Air Force RC-135 rivet joint aircraft was used in a mission on February 4th, collecting electronic communications from cartel operations. The increased surveillance reflects Trump's push to make the military the lead agency in counter-narcotics and border security. Traditionally, the responsibility of law enforcement bodies like the Drug Enforcement Administration and the Department of Homeland Security.
They're not ready for this fight.
It remains unclear how the intelligence gathered will be utilized. Analysts suggest that the data could build evidence for designating cartels as foreign terrorist organizations or be shared with Mexican authorities for joint operations. However, some US officials have expressed concern that the intelligence could be used to justify direct US military strikes on cartel targets inside Mexico.
That's what they should do. Absolutely.
President Trump has previously floated the idea of airstrikes on fentanyl labs and deploying special forces to target cartel leaders. Such actions would likely violate Mexican sovereignty and severely strain diplomatic relations.
Trump has no Mexican sovereignty nonsense. No, you bomb all over the goddamn world. Now you have to deal with our bomb on our border. The Mexican cartels kill more people than ISIS and Al Qaeda put together. We already did those numbers. ISIS and Al Qaeda ain't got shit on the goddamn cartel. They're not even almost doing more head chopping. They not better armed now than the motherfucking Mexican cartel. So we don't want to hear anything about sovereignty when the U.S. military will bomb anywhere in this world for if it's about their national security.
Also initiated the process of formally designating Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. This move could open the door to expanded military action, a prospect that has raised alarms among policy experts. In addition to aerial surveillance, Trump has ordered thousands of active duty troops to the US-Mexico border. Their primary roles include assisting US Border Patrol, providing intelligence analysis and monitoring migrant flows. However, these troops are not authorized to engage in law enforcement activities such as arrests or drug seizures. They are also restricted from direct interaction with migrants, except in logistical support roles. Former officials warned that the increased military presence could provoke violent responses from cartels. Tom Homan, the US border czar, stated in a recent interview that he expects an escalation in violence, noting that cartels have previously engaged in direct combat with the Mexican military. However, analysts caution against treating cartels like traditional
They are.
terrorist organizations. Unlike groups such as ISIS or Boko Haram, Mexican cartels are driven by profit rather than ideology. While some elements of the Mexican government collude with cartels, other factions work against them.
That's not true. That's not true. They're just not driven by profits. They ideology, they have that too. You get deep. They have their reasons for doing what they're doing. They have historical heritage and to bring down the empire, take back land. That's nonsense. And it's stupid to think that these fucking cartel people are just dope dealers who want to make some money. That's crazy. That's not true.
The situation highly complex. Mexico remains one of the United States' largest trading partners, and any unilateral US military action on Mexican soil could severely damage diplomatic ties. Some experts argue that increased US military involvement could undermine cooperation with Mexican authorities, ultimately hindering long-term efforts to combat organized crime.
Bullshit.
The coming weeks will be critical in determining the future of US military involvement in the drug war. With intelligence flights increasing, the Trump administration appears to be laying the groundwork for expanded operations. Whether this leads to deeper cooperation with Mexico or unilateral US military action remains to be seen.
Fuck that. The cartel's working with the Nazis now. Ukraine. See? Definitely, they've been our enemies. Definitely on our list now, nigga. Y'all bastards got the nerve. To work directly with the Nazis? Okay. The cartel want us dead anyway, y'all. They love us.
Offensive on the western bank of the Oskol River. Right now, battles are underway for the possession of 3 settlements, Droshevka, Manikanovka, and Malaya Shapovka. This footage shows the destruction of 2 brand new German Marder infantry fighting vehicles in the village of Malaya Shapovka. The real aces of the sky from the northern group of forces did not leave the enemy a chance. Our soldiers also drove out other evil spirits from the Kharkov region, several heavy Ukrainian drones of the Baba Yaga type. Just look how accurately our drones shoot down enemy drones. The situation is developing no less dynamically in the DPR. This is how the enemy's positions in the Pokrovsk direction are methodically destroyed with the help of powerful FAB gliding bombs. The Russian army is trying to reach the settlements of Troitsk and Orakovo, that is, in fact, to the borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region. In the vicinity of Chasovo Yar, Russian troops occupied the Stupki and Kronichki tract. In the city itself, there are battles for the Novoseverny micro-district and for the territory of the fireproof plant. On the approaches to Chasovo Yar, Russian engineers created a 2-kilometer mesh tunnel. Now the road from Artemovsk is inaccessible to Ukrainian FPV drones. The Kiev authorities confirmed that they will recruit young men aged 18 to 24 into the army. Kiev will officially announce this in the coming days. The head of Zelensky's office, Yermak, claims that all this is voluntary. Even the American media do not believe this. The New York Times suddenly wrote that the Kiev authorities, turns out, are forcibly mobilizing men. Propagandists talk to relatives of mobilized men on the threshold of one of the Kiev military registration and enlistment offices. They take men without asking. They don't even let them say goodbye. They have a bad back, as their mothers and wives say. The Americans' conclusion is this: in Ukraine, the losses are striking, and anxiety has become a constant companion of citizens. Trump's advisor, the funny guy Elon Musk, called for the closure of what we have long called the mouthpiece of the State Department, the Voice of America and Radio Liberty. Musk called the paid propaganda employees rabid Russophobes, who burn $1 billion of American taxpayers' money every year. That is, independent media turned out to be completely corrupt. After USAID was closed, 3 more supposedly respected publications started howling: Politico, the New York Times, the Associated Press, and AP, which ate up $37 million from USAID last year alone, and is now begging for alms right on its front page. The scandal started with Politico. Turns out that through USAID, this newspaper was secretly paid $8 million to serve Joe Biden's personal interests.
Propaganda.
For this money, the paid Politico laundered Hunter Biden's reputation, calling the scandal with the laptop and weapons Russian disinformation. And it portrayed Trump himself as Putin's puppet. Politico's editors are trying to justify themselves. They took money from USAID, but allegedly maintained their independence. Musk, reacting to this, has already written, "I'm laughing my ass off at their independence." The very abbreviation that Musk uses contains an obscene word. I won't quote this in full for ethical reasons, but it's clear that Musk is mocking. The former head of USAID proves her honesty and impartiality. In 3 years of work, Samantha Power, with a salary of $180,000 a year, became richer by $23 million. That is, if you add it all up, she stole $22,460,000. We are talking about the head of an organization that fought corruption from Cuba and Ukraine to Congo all over the world. And for some reason, she turned out to be the main thief. Donald Trump shocked the world by announcing his secret call to Putin. In an interview with the New York Post on board Air Force One, the U.S. president officially confirmed that negotiations on the settlement of the Ukrainian conflict are underway. During the conversation, the American president called Biden's rule a disgrace, and once again he recalled his excellent relationship with Putin. Trump also said that both he and Putin want people to stop dying. Peskov neither confirmed nor denied the information about Putin's contacts with Trump, noting that communications are conducted through different channels. The American leader, however, claims that he has a specific plan for a settlement. Trump again did not provide any details. National Security Advisor Waltz did this for him. In short, a security guarantee for Kiev is Europe's problem. The U.S. goal is to get back $100 billion for the weapons supplied to Kiev at the expense of Ukrainian rare earth metals. And not a word was said about Ukraine's sovereignty. Zelensky himself, who signed a decree banning negotiations with Putin, now swears that he is ready for peace, and he is already selling Ukraine piecemeal. The expired president showed Reuters a detailed map of Ukrainian mineral resources. Gold, coal, titanium, manganese, take it all, comrades Americans. Special emphasis is placed on Donbass. Zelensky suggested that Trump take it away from Putin. Zelensky sent a map of Ukraine's mineral resources to Washington. Are you looking forward to meeting Vladimir Putin? I think I would meet Putin at the right moment, at the right time. As for Putin, you understand that if you don't explain, everyone will think that you regularly talk to President Putin. It's reasonable, they can think so, it makes sense, but I don't want to talk about it. And if we are already talking to Putin, then I don't want to tell you about the conversations too early. But I believe that we are making progress. We want to stop the war between Ukraine and Russia, and I want to stop it simply because I don't like that all these hundreds of thousands of young people, soldiers, are dying. Are you already working on a peace plan or something that can resolve the conflict? We have talked to both sides. Have you had phone conversations with Putin before or after the inauguration? I have. Let's just say I have. I expect many more. We need to end this war. Would you meet with President Putin to talk about peace? If I had an understanding that America and Europe would not abandon us, that they would support us, that they would give us security guarantees, then I would be ready for any format of negotiations. President Trump is ready to bring up the issue of future U.S. aid to Ukraine. We need to cover these costs, and this will be a partnership with the Ukrainians in terms of using their rare earth metals and natural resources, oil and gas, and their purchase of our resources. These conversations will take place this week, and I think the fundamental principle here is that the Europeans must control this conflict in the future. President Trump is going to put an end to this. And as for security guarantees, this will be provided first of all to the Europeans. I told Trump that this is a very rich land. We have minerals. Please look, this is our state. This is our Ukraine with temporarily occupied territories. But we see the Dnieper, the entire Dnieper region. And you see Donetsk here in pink. It's temporarily occupied by the Russians. In Europe, the largest amount of uranium is in Ukraine. Here we see, this is
This is pathetic. This is disgusting. This man is showing the map. That's the land Russia got. Russia took that from you. That's why I keep saying, well, it's temporarily occupied. That's forever, bro. And Trump not even negotiating nothing for you on that. Zelensky is trying to tell Trump, if you help us get that back, we'll bust down trillions with you. I know Trump eyes light up when he hears trillions, but the problem with that is Russia will blow America up before he allow the U.S. to come in and take the trillions that they just took from Zelensky.
Uranium. Uranium is marked here in yellow. I wanted to clarify about lithium. I see that of the lithium reserves that we have, 2 deposits are already occupied. Yes, almost all of it here is occupied. You see.
Excuse me, y'all. This is too good to be true. Almost all of it is occupied. Yeah, that means you don't have it. You lost that because you stabbed Putin in the back. He wanted to negotiate with you in the beginning. Now, see, what do you have to offer Trump? You can't be offering Trump Putin's material. That's Putin stuff now. What do you have, Zelensky? Show us your piece of the map. What do you have to offer? That's what Trump asking, because you can't keep talking about what's occupied, brother. That don't belong to you no more.
See, there is gold, there is coal, there is titanium, there is manganese, or there are rare earth metals. Ukraine is very rich. In terms of rare earth metals specifically, can you clarify one thing? I see that half of the territory here is occupied. This week, our Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense and Special Envoy will be discussing the details of how to end this war. That means both sides have to sit down at the negotiating table. President Trump has said that he is prepared to impose taxes, tariffs, and sanctions. We need to get everyone together to end this war. Chinese President Xi Jinping, Indian Prime Minister Modi, and leaders from across the Middle East. Everyone is ready to help President Trump end this war. Let's just get all parties together at the negotiating table and come to an agreement. Ukrainian propagandists, unfazed by the fact that their country is being sold off at auction, are traveling around Ukraine, showing the overseas gentlemen exactly what rare earth metal deposits look like. This footage shows the Palahovskoye lithium deposit, Kirovograd region, the last rich deposit under Zelensky's control. This is the deposit that Kiev would like to exchange for membership in the European Union and NATO. All other deposits in the Donbass and Zaporizhzhia are under Russian control, as are the deposits near Pokrovsk. But Pokrovsk is a gray area, and electricity prices have skyrocketed in the Baltics. This is a direct consequence of Russophobia and the fight against the Soviet past. Lithuanian President Nausėda, after a press conference, where the disconnection of the Baltic states from the Russian energy system was announced, said, "Goodbye Russia, goodbye Lenin." At the same time, archival documents were found in Lithuania, or rather, Nausėda's own party card. Nausėda joined the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in 1988, but later hid this fact during the presidential elections. Well, and now they naturally accuse the leader of mighty Lithuania of hypocrisy. And it is not very clear what bad Nausėda did specifically Lenin. Thanks to Lenin, the Lithuanians gained independence and statehood in general. And even under the terrible Stalin, territorial gifts to Lithuania continued. They are marked on the map. Without Lenin and the revolution, I think, there would have been no independent Lithuania at all. In the worst case, this territory would have been divided between Poland and Germany, and the Lithuanians would have been of no use to anyone there. And now, after the very smart decision of the Baltics to disconnect the electricity supply from Russia, electricity in Lithuania has instantly increased in price by more than 1.5 times, from 92 euros per megawatt per hour to almost 150 euros. The Russian Foreign Ministry called the Baltics' inappropriate behavior a continuation of the destruction of countries and peoples that once had the potential to prosper. Whether or not to send Taurus missiles to Ukraine is one of the main topics of the television debates between the still German Chancellor Scholz and the main contender for his seat, the opposition leader Merz. Olaf Scholz is against supplying Kiev with long-range missiles. He said that he considers it wrong to transfer weapons capable of striking deep into Russian territory to Ukraine. Merz believes that Berlin should follow the example of Washington, London, and Paris, which have already transferred their long-range missiles to Kiev. Scholz, who spent tens of billions of euros of German taxpayers' money on weapons for the Banderites, suddenly had an epiphany on the eve of the elections. The reason for Germany's terrible economic situation is the war in Ukraine. Bloomberg writes that Germany's economy is literally collapsing. They cite high energy prices and rapid deindustrialization as the reason. Automotive giants are moving factories overseas, and the country's largest steel producers are shutting down blast furnaces.
See, and that's what they're not telling anybody around the world. All of the European economies are collapsing, like America's economy is absolutely devastating and is collapsing. But not Russia, China, the BRICS nations. No. Everybody who didn't follow the dictates of America and try to help Ukraine. The Ukrainian allies, their economies is horrible. Anti-imperialist economies is better than that.
A few hours ago, the former chairman of the NATO Military Committee and retired German Air Force 4-star General, Harald Kuyat, issued a statement that made the effect of an exploding bomb. In particular, during an interview with German journalists, Harald Kuyat bluntly stated that Ukraine had suffered a crushing defeat in the current war. According to him, the West has provided Ukraine with unprecedented military and economic assistance for 3 years, transferring hundreds of billions of euros to Kiev. In addition, hundreds of expensive military equipment, including fighter jets, were also transferred to Ukraine. At the same time, NATO countries continued to train Ukrainian soldiers and provide the Ukrainian army with intelligence data. A large number of NATO military advisors and mercenaries from almost all Western countries, including Latin America, were also sent to Ukraine. And despite all this, Ukraine has not only failed to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia, but even failed to weaken the Russian army. It's time for Western politicians and the media to accept the harsh reality. Despite military and financial support from the United States and Europe, Ukraine has been unable to achieve military success on the battlefield. If the West continues to supply Kiev with weapons, while insisting that the Ukrainians keep fighting, in that case, it will only result in the complete destruction of Ukraine, retired German 4-star General Harald Kuyat said. Well, my dear truth seekers, although numerous Western think tanks and reputable military experts have already recognized Ukraine's obvious defeat in this war, there is still a group of countries in Europe advocating the continuation of this war, in order to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia. By the way, Britain and France preside over this group of countries. Currently, it is Paris and London that continue to be the main warmongers in Europe, insisting that Ukraine keep fighting, even though Ukraine has already lost over 1 million soldiers in vast territories, along with numerous cities and towns. Meanwhile, the Russian army continues its victorious offensive in almost all key directions of the front, including the Kursk region. So, on February 10, at 11 a.m. Moscow time, war correspondents reported on another success of the Russian army in the Kursk region. According to them, the units of the groups of troops under the designation Sever have completely seized the initiative in the Sverdlikovo area. It is reported that over the past 24 hours, Russian troops have managed to advance 800 meters both in the Sverdlikovo itself and its vicinity. Currently, the Russian army controls 60% of this settlement's territory. At the same time, war correspondents confirmed that Russian Marines from the elite 155th Brigade of the Pacific Fleet had fully cleared Ulanka and Fanasyevka of Ukrainian nationalists, who had penetrated there during the so-called counterattack. Meanwhile, after the liberation of the city of Toretsk by the Russian army, Ukrainian soldiers began to complain about increased artillery and airstrikes on the positions of Ukrainian troops in Konstantinovka. At the same time, units of the 1st, 9th, and 132nd Motorized Rifle Brigades of the Russian army continue to advance towards Konstantinovka. Currently, Russian troops are only 9 kilometers from the southeastern suburbs of this city. The situation of the Ukrainian army also continues to deteriorate rapidly in Pokrovsk direction of the front. In particular, Russian sources have confirmed that after yesterday's liberation of the settlement of Uspenskoye, Russian units entered the urban-type settlement of Novo-Alexandrovka. It is reported that as of February 11, 2025, Russian units of groups of troops under the designation center managed to take control of 40% of the territory of this settlement. Insiders in Kiev confirmed that on February 10, Volodymyr Zelensky ordered the commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, General Alexander Syrsky, to do everything possible to hold the city of Pokrovsk and prevent the Russian army from crossing the border into the Dnipropetrovsk region. For that, General Syrsky deployed the 15th, 55th, and 107th Artillery Brigades to Pokrovsk direction. These artillery brigades are considered the most powerful in the Ukrainian army, because they are equipped with the most modern Western artillery systems, including multiple launch rocket systems. According to Zelensky, if the Ukrainian army stops the Russians in Pokrovsk direction and does not allow them to enter the Dnipropetrovsk region, it will force the Trump administration to start talking to Moscow from a position of strength. However, incoming information from the Zaporizhia direction of the front indicates that the Russian army is preparing to enter the Dnipropetrovsk region not only from the east, but also from the south. So, a few hours ago, the Ukrainian General Staff confirmed the abnormal activity of Russian troops in Zaporizhia direction of the front. It is reported that the Russian command continues to pull the most combat-ready and experienced units into the Zaporizhia region. Everything that is happening indicates that the Russians are preparing a powerful strike in the south of Ukraine, in order to take control of the entire northern part of the Zaporizhia region, with further entry into the Dnipropetrovsk region. Earlier, Ukrainian Army Colonel Vladislav Seleznev stated that the Russians had concentrated a 120,000-strong army in the Zaporizhia region, and that this army is led by an experienced General Mikhail Teplinsky, whom even Russia's enemies consider an invincible military genius. Throughout his entire military career, this Russian general has not lost a single battle. Thanks to this, he won the respect even of his enemies. General Mikhail Teplinsky develops offensive operations very carefully, paying great attention to intelligence data. As a result, even during the offensive, his units suffer minimal losses in manpower and equipment. Military experts are confident that it is General Teplinsky who will lead the liberation operation of not only the Dnipropetrovsk region, but also of all key cities of the Nikolaev and Odessa regions. My dear truth seekers, if the Russians launch a full-scale offensive in the Zaporizhia region, it will be a real disaster for the Ukrainian command. The fact is that the Ukrainian army will have to defend itself along the entire combat contact line. As a result, the Ukrainian generals will lose the opportunity to carry out maneuvers with reserves, which will inevitably lead to the final breakthrough of the front, and the mass flight of Ukrainian soldiers and officers.
About, but I must raise it with you. CNN reports literally while we were airing the Lear commercial. Hamas has announced that the next hostage release scheduled for Saturday will be postponed, alleging Israel has failed to abide by the terms of the agreement. Without reading this whole thing, Hamas is alleging that the IDU or the IDF, has failed to vacate Gaza as it's required to. This might be just the break that Netanyahu is looking for, huh?
Well, they were anticipating that phase 2 wouldn't go through. You know, as Alistair explained earlier with your conversation, there had been this secret codicil that Netanyahu had filed that the United States wasn't at least signatory to. None of the other negotiating states, Qatar, etc., were apprised of. But it was sort of the price that Netanyahu, in order to appease Trump, to get the first phase done, but to assure his extremists, the Ben Gavirs, the Smotriches, that it wouldn't go forward into the second phase. Of course, now this is again these kinds of games are, I think, going to blow up in Netanyahu's face, because having released hostages already, first the female soldiers, and they look good, followed by these last three gentlemen who were pretty gaunt and emaciated. That there's going to be pressure within Israel to secure the release of all these hostages. But now what Netanyahu is vowing to do is to walk away from them, to sentence them basically to death.
I mean, does Netanyahu really care about the hostages?
Oh, no. He doesn't think about them. He's concerned about Netanyahu saving his own rear end, and that's what really makes him sort of so despicable. In theory, a leader of a country ought to have the welfare of the people as a whole at the heart of what they're doing, recognizing that they have a stewardship, a responsibility. But instead, this is all about self-aggrandizement, and not only the hostages be damned, but the Palestinians should die. And so that's what has led Israel into this, condition of committing genocide.
Larry, I don't know if there's anything you can do. We're having difficulty hearing you. I don't know if there's a volume you can adjust or anything like that.
I don't know.
Hate to raise this on air, but there's no other way to address this.
Let's see what let me look and see what the output is there. I've got is that any better?
It's a little bit better. Good. Whatever you just did.
I mean, we can
Okay, back to our,
boost it up.
yeah, thank you. Back to our subject matter. What is because I really want to talk to you about Trump and Putin. What is the Kremlin's view of the genocide in Gaza? Do we know?
Yeah, no, they've condemned it. They've been, they've been very outspoken about it. They also came out very quickly, along with China, and condemned Trump's statement about enforcing a new Nakba, a new forced expulsion of the Palestinians from Gaza. Very much against that. So they are at odds with Trump on that on U.S. policy towards Palestine.
I'm going to guess that they haven't said anything publicly about Trump's stunt on owning and occupying.
Oh no, they did.
They did.
They came out and denounced it. They said it was.
My God, has any country on the planet besides Israel supported it?
No. I mean, this is just it's such a bizarre statement that is out of it's out of control on the part of Trump. Now, I think again, as Alistair explained it, and as I have said before, this is very much this has more in common with like Trump's appearance against man on the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, where he go in and threatened to beat up a guy who was physically bigger and stronger than him, and it was all, and then we're going to shave each other's heads. It is this showmanship thing. It's not really part of a serious negotiating strategy in terms of laying out this is an objective he wants to achieve. He's using it as a club, as a threat, in order to try to secure something.
So when Trump says something like this, that is impractical and probably impossible, when he says, I just spoke to Putin, and it apparently didn't happen, when he says Russia has lost 1 million men in Ukraine, which we know is very far from the truth, when he says Putin is ruining the Russian economy, which is very far from the truth, how does the Kremlin react to all of this?
It's Trump. They just put it into his Trump. They recognize that he's a blowhard, that he's serious about negotiating, but he's got this peculiar negotiating strategy where the things he says in public are more designed to create an image for the public that then Trump can play off for his own political purposes. But when it comes down to actually negotiating, a different guy shows up behind scenes. Now, I would note that within the last 24 hours, the Russians have finally admitted that there are contacts between the U.S. State Department and the Foreign Ministry, that they are now talking, that avenue has now opened. It had been closed for at least the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years.
Well, that is certainly a step in the right direction. It's not
Correct.
Trump and Putin, not yet, but it's baby steps toward that, I would imagine.
Right. Sergei Rybkov, the deputy foreign minister, was out announcing that. But one of the things he also indicated, he goes, look, here's what the United States is saying, referencing some of the things that you just said about Trump, or what Trump has said. And he says the West is going to realize those are not serious proposals. Those are non-starters. So we're talking, and we're happy to talk and have actual negotiations, but it's got to be based upon the realities of, and they always say this now, what's on the ground? Well, what's on the ground? Russia controls Luhansk, controls the vast majority of Donetsk, is on the offensive in Zaporizhia and Kherson. They're not giving those up. And those four former oblasts of the Ukraine are now part of Russia. Russia is not going, they're not pawns that can be negotiated and given away. They are irrefutably part of Russia.
Do you think that Trump and Sebastian Gorka and Mike Waltz and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, understand that? Because
No.
it appears that General Kellogg doesn't.
Yeah, no, I don't think any of them understand it. They're still sort of intoxicated with the the elixir of American supremacy, and that they believe their own press clippings, so to speak, that Russia's on the ropes, Russia's in a desperate situation. Of course, they're going to do what we demand of them because we're so strong and they're so weak, and it's crazy.
Did the Trump administration recently say to the Starmer administration in Great Britain, you guys take the leadership of the Ukraine Defense Group? And if so, what does that mean?
Well, you chair it, and then you're the one on the lead for trying to go out and shake everybody else down to cough up some money. So you're the chief sales representative now, and that I think that was pretty telling on the part of where Trump stands with respect to Ukraine, because it is that's part of how you control the process, chairing meetings, deciding who's going to speak, who's not going to speak, what's on the agenda. That puts you into control. And Trump just sent a clear message: hey, the United States, we're no longer interested in being in control of that. You guys, you Europeans, you guys take the lead. You handle this.
You and I have talked about this. I think I asked you the same question last week. Maybe the answer is the same, maybe it's different. Is the Biden spigot of military aid still open, and is aid still flowing from the United States to Kyiv?
Yeah, I think there were some of at least the weapon systems are still in the pipeline, and those that's a bureaucratic process that started. The financial flows, though, to the government, that's been suspended. So it's a mixed bag. But it comes back to, you send the equipment, you send artillery shells, you send tanks, you send armored vehicles, and who's there to operate them? That's the problem. Ukraine is suffering a serious shortage of trained, qualified personnel to man those systems or use them.
What is the, if we know, Kremlin reaction to Trump washing his hands of this fundraising effort to support Ukraine and putting it in the hands of the British?
I have seen no reaction from them. I don't think they naturally care, because it does not change. They'll take it on board as another intelligence indicator of what Washington's intentions under Trump are with respect to Ukraine. So they're able to see that no matter what Trump says in public about supporting Ukraine or standing with Ukraine, that what they're actually doing is shedding responsibility, shedding positions of influence where they could direct the process in a way that again, it'd be more of Washington's control. So they're really kicking this to NATO, and maybe it's even a way of Trump to try to demonstrate that NATO's a failure and shouldn't continue to exist.
Interesting. If that's the case, I want to get back to the Gaza Strip, because my friends and former colleagues at Fox recently released a portion of an interview between Brett Baier and President Trump, which was not released last night prior to the Super Bowl. The whole interview had been taped last week, but this question and answer is very telling when Brett Baier asks the president, would the Palestinians be able to return? Chris, cut number 5.
Think of it as a real estate development for the future. It would be a beautiful piece of land.
Would the Palestinians
no
have the
big
right
money
to return?
spent. No, they wouldn't, because they're going to have much better housing, much better. In other words, I'm talking about building a permanent place for them, because if they have to return now, it will be years before you could ever, it's not habitable. It will be years before it could happen. I'm talking about starting to build, and I think I could make a deal with Jordan. I think I could make a deal with Egypt. You know, we give them billions and billions of dollars a year.
Before you respond, Steve Witkoff, the president's billionaire real estate developer friend from New York, who is his point person for Gaza and Israel, said last night before the Super Bowl that it would take 10 to 15 years to do this. Okay, so where do we stand? Permanent? They're kicked out. They can't return. Israel will sell us the land. Israel doesn't own the land.
Right. Well, and notice that if you're going to move the Palestinians out, Trump's premise is that, oh, they're going to have these great houses, man. They're going to be spectacular condos with, you know, golden toilets and platinum appliances. It's going to be fabulous. Why would they want to go anywhere else? Well, it's going to take time to build that too. Okay, you have to build that first in order to then have something to, quote, entice the Palestinians to go there. The Palestinians aren't going there. And despite Trump's confidence, we give these guys billions of dollars. Okay, Donald, Jordan and Egypt may have behaved as prostitutes up to this point, but there are certain things they're not willing to do for money. Okay. And so this is not a transaction with let's call it geopolitical prostitution. That's not going to happen. They've made it clear that if they went down that road, both countries, the leaders in both countries, would be at risk. It would probably spark off a civil war both in Jordan and in Egypt. Last thing that they want. I think Trump has been riding a high for these first 2 weeks over what they achieved in negotiating the ceasefire. But now that Bibi is walking away from phase 2, it's going to leave the hostages back in the news as not being rescued. And so Trump's, hey, Donald, you were celebrating this, man. You're going to get the hostages released. Well, they're not released. And now Netanyahu's pulled the rug out from under you. What are you going to do about it?
So Alistair Crook reports that Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, told Ron Dermer, the American-born senior advisor to Netanyahu, that Trump does not support, will not condone an invasion of Iran.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think Netanyahu reacted when Ron Dermer told him that?
Probably breathed a sigh of relief that keep them from doing something stupid. No, I mean, look, there's this talk that, oh boy, we're going to go show Iran, we're going to whip them because they don't have any air defense, et cetera, et cetera. It's ridiculous. The only way that Israel could destroy Iran is if the United States foolishly decided to help facilitate such an attack. And listen, the United States cannot destroy Iran unless it wants to nuke the whole place. Okay? That's the only way. The United States lacks the military capability, that lacks the troop strength, it lacks the logistics to be able to launch an attack on Iran that would take control of Iran. Can we launch some airstrikes that do some damage? Yes, but that means Iran will be in a position to launch retaliatory airstrikes against U.S. bases that are still there in Qatar at Al Udeid Air Force Base and up into Syria. So, this Trump, at least, I think, is recognizing that's a non-starter, and so it leaves Israel with no option on that front. They want to destroy Iran. The American Jews who are Zionists, who are in the camp of, I can show you predictions they were making 2-3 months ago that once Trump's in, he's going to get with Netanyahu and they're going to go wipe out Iran. Not happening.
Notwithstanding what the Zionists want, notwithstanding what Netanyahu claims, notwithstanding what Trump himself has said, does the American State Department consider Iran to be a state sponsor of terrorism?
Oh yeah, they get they got the #1 label, and I published at Sonar 21 on Friday night. I took the State Department's annual report. It used to be called Patterns of Global Terrorism when I was there. It's now called Country Reports on Terrorism, and they prepared a statistical annex. And so I've presented the statistical annex from the last 9 years, since 2016. And what it shows very clearly, it lists in the first, in 2016, 2017, 2018, it listed the top 5 groups that were most active in terrorist attacks. And then in the subsequent years, it listed the top 10. Only in 2023 did 2 groups, or 3 groups actually, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis appear in the top 10. Well, everything that those groups did with respect to fighting Israel in this war of genocide that Israel's carrying out against the Palestinians, that got counted as terrorism. And remember, the definition of terrorism offered by Bibi Netanyahu, which I fully endorse, fully agree, is the use of violence against civilians for political purposes. And by that definition, the #1 terrorist group in the Middle East entity is Israel. But when you go back and look at those 9 years, except for 2023, none of the groups listed in those lists are Iranian-backed. The groups that show up are all backed by the Saudis or people from Saudi Arabia or from the other Gulf states. ISIS and the Taliban consistently were listed as #1, #2.
Is HTS in there? The people
Oh,
that
yeah.
just took over Syria?
Yeah, 5 of the last 7 years, HTS is listed in the top 10. And they, we now find out that USAID was providing money, at least to the predecessor organization of HTS, which was Al-Nusra. I mean, so this club of terrorism that the United States uses to brand somebody as you're an evil terrorist. It's just a label. It's something that we're very flexible on, because when we find it convenient, like HTS, who, by the way, Jelani, the head of it, he had a $10 million bounty on his head. I don't know if you can see over my head. I've got a picture of the poster for bin Laden. We only offered $5 million for bin Laden, the U.S. government. And so we're saying that Jelani is twice as bad as bin Laden. And yet now we're giving him money. We're recognizing him. We took away the terrorist reward on his head, and we're dealing with him. So this notion of, we can't deal with Iran because they're the #1 sponsor of terrorism. Well, they're not the #1 sponsor of terrorism. That's just a bald-faced lie.
Trump the other day said at a cabinet meeting, this is macabre, but he said it, if I'm assassinated, blame Iran and obliterate them.
Yeah.
He said that right before Bibi arrived. Who knows if it was said to please Netanyahu, or it's just one of those things he says that are thoughtless and baseless.
The only country that's been assassinating leaders and top officials in the other country has been the United States.
And Israel.
But we assassinated Soleimani under Trump's orders. But before that, you had, as I recall, it was at least 4 nuclear scientists that were assassinated on their way to work in Iran. So this legacy of the United States supporting terrorist groups like the Mujahideen al-Qaeda, who carry out terrorist attacks in Iran. And yet, despite that, Iran has not retaliated by carrying out terrorist attacks in the United States. And what's really remarkable is, yes, Iran is a Shia, comes out of a Shia theology. They're not the ones backing ISIS, backing the terrorist groups that attacked the United States on 9/11. That, in fact, it was the Iranians with Hezbollah that went into Syria to fight ISIS, and ISIS had a pretty big body count around the world of carrying out extremist attacks to achieve their Sunni vision, but instead we lambaste the Iranians. We make them the villains and coddle and enable the very ideological terrorists on the Sunni side that attacked us. It's insane.
Here's what Trump said.
It's Iran and their proxies who have threatened to retaliate against you and your team by killing you guys for taking out Soleimani.
Well, they haven't done that, and that would be a terrible thing for them to do. Not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That would be the end. I've left instructions. If they do it, they get obliterated. There won't be anything left.
There you go.
Yeah, there's tough talk. The reality behind the scenes is Trump is trying through Witkoff to get negotiations underway with Iran. And we have also learned in the last 48 hours that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, not interested in talking to the United States, at least, because they already feel that they've been betrayed by Trump, that Trump can't be trusted. Now,
well, there is a basis for that from the last time around.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. But that doesn't mean there won't be negotiations. That means Trump may have to go through Russia to get to Iran, and that any deal cut with Iran will be part of a broader deal with Russia, and maybe it's even spill over into China. This is, Trump is, he does, to his credit, he goes for the big idea, and he doesn't always explain that in public in a way that would be comprehensible to people. But he recognizes that if he can pull off a grand deal that secures Iran recognizing Israel's right to exist, that secures actually a state for the Palestinians in accordance with what the Saudis and others have demanded now, and that a peace with Russia that reduces the anxiety of NATO, that he'll be a shoo-in for the Nobel Peace Prize. That's what he wants.
Great. Larry, great conversation, my dear friend. Terrific conversation. I realize we covered the gap.
.20 or go to LearJudgeSnap.com and tell them the judge sent you.
Scott Ritter, always a pleasure, my dear friend. Thank you very much for joining us. This announcement that Trump made about the U.S. owning, buying, developing the Gaza Strip, about which you and I have spoken already, but which he's doubled down on. He actually said on his way to the Super Bowl, or maybe it was on his way home, I don't know which, but he was in Air Force One, that the Palestinians who he will cause to be expelled from the Gaza Strip would not be permitted to return. Made me think of this. Is Trump under Netanyahu's thumb, or is Netanyahu under Trump's?
Let's
make the relationship very clear. The United States of America is the world's most powerful superpower. Israel is not. Now we can go down the path of a lot of anti-Semitic tropes, talk about how Jews control everything and all this stuff. I'm not going that route. What I'm saying is straight up, there's a pro-Israeli lobby in the United States that exerts significant influence on policy matters as they relate to Israel and the Middle East. That's it. Israel doesn't direct the United States. Israel doesn't control the United States. Israel can't destroy the United States. The United States can eliminate Israel anytime we want to. Israel exists only because we allow it to exist, because we facilitate its existence. Now, in the Cold War period, there was a mutually beneficial relationship to have, in effect, a land-based aircraft carrier right there in the Mediterranean to give the United States the ability to project power via proxy to control Russian influence in the Middle East. Today,
very foolish and arrogant of Scott to think that Israel exists because the United States allow it to exist. The U.S. didn't fucking create the Israelis. The small hats helped create the U.S. The U.S. exists because the small hats allowed it to exist. And the U.S., along with the rest of those European nations, are puppets of the fucking small hats. You see, they just want to tell the fucking truth. The United States will do nothing except what those Zionists tell them to fucking do. That those politicians done sold out all their constituents, the military done sold out their constituents because the Zionists hold the power. So what is this arrogance that the U.S. is in control of Israel? That's fucking nonsense.
There's not so much benefit to be had by with Israel and its geopolitical significance of its geography. It's purely political. It's purely the extent to which the Israeli lobby has bought Congress on matters pertaining to Israel. I think what Israel will find out, though, is that make America first, make America great again trumps Israel. We will do what needs to be done to appease the Israeli lobby to make sure that the Israelis feel that they haven't been neglected. Trump will do any number of policy. We saw that in his first term, moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, etc. But at the end of the day, Israel will never, ever, ever be allowed to position itself to bring harm to the United States of America, to threaten the national security of the United States of America in a meaningful fashion. We can talk about peripheral threats. I'm talking about to do something that brings about the collapse of the United States. So the notion that Netanyahu is calling the shots is as absurd as the day is long. Donald Trump is in charge. He is influenced by a pro-Israeli lobby, but he and he alone is calling the shots.
What happens if he defies Netanyahu? What will the donor class and the Israeli lobby, led by Mrs. Adelson, do?
What can they do? How many divisions does Miss Adelson control?
Nice question. She apparently has quite a bit of influence. He had her there in the White House when he and Netanyahu were meeting the other day, and she was right there. She apparently, according to Alistair Crooks, said directly to Netanyahu, "You will honor the ceasefire."
Yeah, there's only one person in charge. It's not Adelson. It's not Netanyahu. It's Donald Trump. He's the president of the United States of America. And I need not remind people, he's not running for office again. He doesn't have to appease anybody. What he needs to do, if he wants to continue the MAGA legacy to facilitate transfer of power to J.D. Vance in 4 years, is have successful foreign policy, not to allow the United States to be dragged into yet another Middle East entanglement. Remember, it is Donald Trump who reposted Jeffrey Sachs calling out Netanyahu for getting America caught up in wars that we didn't need to be caught up in the Middle East. Donald Trump reposted those because he believes that. He believes that Netanyahu led him down that path. So there's just no way that
foolishness. Donald Trump just said if those hostages not free in Palestine by Saturday, all hell gonna break loose. The Hamas already told him, bring hell. You keep saying that. Now look, the hostage negotiation has been canceled because Benjamin Netanyahu never wanted no hostage negotiation to begin with. And the disrespect Donald Trump has been showing, talking about he's going to move them people to another place. He just disrespected the Jordanian king today. That puppet sat right there in Donald Trump's face and let Donald Trump tell him he going to take some of them people. They don't want to be in their own land. Just all type of ethnic cleansing nonsense was coming out of his mouth. So what is Scott Ritter talking about? Donald Trump is getting you deeper into the Middle East bullshit. And he's doing it because Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel wants him to. This don't benefit America, but he's doing it. He's doing it. So for Scott to say Donald Trump is going to pull us out of entanglements, well, he's not doing it. He just got in office and he's further entrenched it, talking about moving the Palestinians around. That is World War III. What the hell are you talking about?
Donald Trump is going to allow Netanyahu to take us down that path again. And I think this is clear. He has put forward a policy projection on Gaza that incorporates a lot of, what Israel
policy projection. See, I just got to tell the truth so I can be on the record. It's ethnic cleansing, brother. I don't give a fuck who mouth they come out of. Come out of Trump mouth. You talking about moving people off of their land? Not only is it colonial colonizing bullshit, but it's ethnic cleansing. You can't move people off their land to another place and call it anything but theft and colonial behavior. But see what Scott just did? He put lipstick on a pig and called it a policy. Oh, the hell that is. Ethnic cleansing, genocidal policy.
Wanted to do, get the Palestinians out, rebuild, etc. Except he's done it in a way that keeps Israel out of it. He's not saying we're sharing this with you. This belongs to you. He said this belongs to me. This is America's. Yeah. We're doing this.
That's worse.
And that's putting Israel in its place. And the other thing is, I think Trump is doing that because if you brought Israel in, that complicates the art of the deal. You see, right now there's only one player who's negotiating on behalf of the United States and its position in Gaza, and that's Donald Trump, because it's only an American position. And I believe that he's put this position out.
What fucking position do America have in Gaza? You see how disgusting that is? And him being an old good military boy, he don't see nothing wrong with that. This is none of your business. And we didn't vote Trump in to be going seize Gaza and talk about building anything on that territory. That's disgusting. Even thinking like that. I ain't talking about pushing Israel aside. Nah, are you crazy? You're doing it for Israel. Jared Kushner and them, those are small hats. See, Scott, I don't know how much they pay him to talk like this. Oh, I forgot they did seize your passport, huh, Scott? The FBI did. See what I'm saying? We got to remember that. He facing federal prison. And all of a sudden, he talking about ethnic cleansing is okay policy for the United States. I'm not ever going along with that type of bullshit. I don't give a damn who in the White House.
Out there, not because he's going to implement it, because he can't, but because he's trying to create the conditions where people, in order to forestall the potential of him trying to implement, will say, no, here's a counter proposal. This is a counter proposal. And it's going to be a clean counter proposal because it only deals with them and the United States. There won't be any Israeli aspect to it at all because Donald Trump hasn't allowed Israel to become embroiled in the Gaza issue.
Right, but this proposal that he made is so impractical as to be nearly impossible. What did Netanyahu gain other than maybe a little lifeline on his premiership to keep Smotrich and Mr. Smotrich's allies from departing the government?
I don't think Netanyahu gained anything. I think this is a loss for Netanyahu. It creates perceptions that Gaza will be helped. He can say, oh, Hamas will be dealt with, but he didn't deal with Hamas. Trump is. Trump's solving the problem. This is a huge humiliation for Benjamin Netanyahu, the man who, since the mid-1990s, has sold himself as the de facto guru of Israeli national security, Israeli defense issues. He alone, Netanyahu alone, can solve these problems. And here we have a situation where there is a problem that for the past 15 months, he couldn't solve. Hamas, Gaza. And Donald Trump's come in and said, I got this. Sit down, shut up. That's pretty much what Trump told him.
What? You got to be fucking kidding me. So let me get this right. So for over a year, Hamas has kicked the Israeli military ass in hand-to-hand combat. Now, I mean, talk about the kids, the women and children that died. I'm talking about the soldiers who then gave them a good ass whooping, underground guerrilla tunnel fighters. You're telling me, because Trump blurted some bullshit in the White House, Hamas is what, going to agree to it? Oh, let me guess, the Marines, the Green Beret, the Delta, the SEAL Team 6, they're going to go clean out Hamas. This is delusional. I remember he said this bullshit. Just remember this. We're not going to let him get away with this. What the fuck are they going to do? What are they going to go do? They couldn't beat the Taliban, bro. Hamas got better weapons than the fucking Taliban. Come on, this is arrogance of Mr. Ritter here. Just because Trump blurted some shit out, okay, cool. Now you got to go send your military. And just because you got all the planes and all, we've seen that movie before, you got to go in them tunnels to deal with Hamas, Mr. Marine.
And so this is a humiliation for Netanyahu. He can't take any solace from this. This isn't a chest thumping period for him. This is, a chastised teenage boy sort of coming out of the principal's office trying to spin it that, no, everything's okay. I was only suspended for 3 days, not a week.
Better humble himself, man.
But no, this isn't a victory for Netanyahu at all. Because again, as you pointed out, none of this is going to happen.
So what does
None of
Trump
this is going to
gain?
happen.
What does Trump gain by making this offer, which is impossible to achieve?
Well, the first thing he does is he seizes control of the agenda. Look to the extent to which the Biden administration was held hostage by the Israelis. Right. Everything had to be run by Netanyahu. Everything had to get the Israeli permission. Everything. Trump's saying, I don't need your permission. I'm not seeking your permission. I'm not asking your permission. I'm taking charge. That's what he gains. He has made the United States the only voice when it comes to.
Oh, that's what Netanyahu wanted him to do. Use your military. He passed Trump the baton. Here, finish this wall for me. See, this man is lying to their people. This is not Trump saying, okay, we're going to finish this. Or we're the bigger dogs. No, this is designers telling him, now you use your military because we can't handle this. These people don't fought too hard. They refuse to give up. Remember, it's more Hamas fighters than it was when the war began. They have, we just seen it at the hostage transfer. We just seen how weaponized they are. The humiliation. We act like because Trump said, I'm the American president. Oh, now Hamas is going to lay down and say, here, you can have our homeland. That's disgusting and ridiculous, man. What Trump did was he pushed himself into a corner. You said they better give those hostages up by Saturday or all hell going to break loose. Okay, cool. They gave you the finger. Now, Trump going to have to do something. But I tell you what's going to happen, some negotiations. He's going to beg Netanyahu to come on, renegotiate that deal. But what Hamas said was, look, your military haven't left the areas you're supposed to leave after we gave some hostages. Also, you're not letting in the equipment that we need to dig up under the rubble. Our loved ones are buried under rubble. We want to get our loved ones from up under the rubble. Israel is holding back. And Hamas told them, some of y'all dead hostages, captives, we told y'all some of them dead, they under the rubble. How are we supposed to get all of this crumbled building up? You see the games they playing, so that's another reason Hamas said, man, fuck the games, bro. We just do playing. So Trump said Saturday, all hell gonna break loose. Hamas said, the hell with Trump. Send your army. Come on, man. That's why you don't go straight to the tough guy shit, because when somebody call that, you got to stand on that shit or you get humiliated. No way in the world Trump finna send the U.S. military into Gaza to fight Hamas. That's not gonna happen.
Resolution of this issue. He's pushed Israel to the side. And like I said, I think at some point in time, there will be counter proposals put on the table that Trump and Trump alone will respond to. He's not going to allow Netanyahu to once again muddy the waters. And I think that's what Trump gains. This is the initiating phase of negotiations. Look, Judge, let's be honest. I don't know and you don't know. Nobody knows what's going through Trump's head. This is pure speculation on my part. I think it's informed speculation, but I can't sit here and I don't want people to think that I'm I'm telling you what,
No, I
Donald Trump told
understand,
me on
I
a phone call
understand.
last
But
night.
I wonder if Trump has had enough of the Zionist influence in American foreign policy. I mean, he has surrounded himself with uber Zionists.
Are you fucking crazy?
Hegseth,
Are you crazy?
Rubio.
Every single last cabinet member he picked kissed the ass of Israel before they got the job. Are you kidding me? He surrounded himself with nothing but rabid Zionists. Really? Is he tired of the influence? You could have fooled me. But like I said, we wasn't naive. We knew the stranglehold that the small hats had on our government. But for Scott Ritter to sit here and pretend like, you see, this is the Anglo-Saxon him who really don't want to admit that America is ran by the small hats. They just don't want to understand this. But the whole world knows it. Putin is laughing. He really feel bad for us. But they're laughing because you fought no wars on your own behalf. All of our wars for the last decade has been behind, guess who? The small hats. And in particular, Benjamin Netanyahu. Why this man talking about Trump is the boss of Benjamin Netanyahu. Imagine that. Benjamin Netanyahu been running the small hats for decades. He went to Iraq because he said so. Afghanistan because he said so. Libya because he said so. And it's all on record. They just showed you that. Syria because he said so. Come on, man. And now Gaza, all the creme de la crop because he's saying so.
Waltz.
That assassination got Gorka. That assassination.
I think maybe he's had enough.
Well, I mean, there's that old saying, hold your friends close, but your enemies closer. By wrapping himself with these Zionists, they are, for instance, what is Elise Stefanik going to do?
Mental gymnastics.
The president of the United States has now put forward a policy. He didn't coordinate with her. This didn't go through State Department. The United Nations didn't receive talking points. What is she going to do? Go before the Security Council and contradict the president of the United States? No, he controls her. What is Mike Huckabee going to do? The ambassador, ultra-Zionist. What influence does he have? None. Marco Rubio wasn't a player in this. Hegseth, nothing. They're all responding to Trump. They're not advising Trump. Everybody had sat there and said the Zionists are going to control Trump. How did they control him?
This is crazy. You know what? I don't know if I'm going to be having anything to do with Scott this because I'm sorry, y'all. This is serious business. This is very depressing and humiliating for Mr. Scott Ritter. Excellent Ukrainian analyst, but Ukraine, he gave us some excellent analysis on Ukraine. But when they see that passport, I've been noticing some things from him. I really have. But on this, he's saying those Zionists in the U.S. government, see, Trump is already saying what should be done. So they can't go against Trump because he said the most outrageous, he said the most hardline, he said the most preposterous, he said the most Zionist thing you could say, and that's we're going to seize Gaza and kick their ass out. Boy, that's what they want you to say, Mr. President. Why would they come behind you? They're going to say what Trump said. What? So Trump showed them by saying, give Israel everything they wanted and all of that bullshit about America's going to own it. Boy, we know who really going to own it. You can wrap America around it all you want. We know who really going to own it.
This was a unilateral action by a president who behaves unilaterally. So he brought the Zionists in.
It appears he didn't even consult the people whose names you and I have just ticked off, who comprise the universe of his inner circle of national security people.
They're irrelevant, Judge. They've been made irrelevant. So all the people out there, they're going, oh, these are the worst Zionists in the world, this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, on paper, it looks that way. How did they influence this policy? Tell me how, and the answer is they didn't. Donald Trump did this by himself, for better or for worse.
Is Israel an ally of the United States?
On paper, yes. In reality, no. Look, I just want to remind
you. There's no treaty.
No, there's no treaty. But what I mean is superficially, the way we talk. Let me remind people that in the 1980s, there was a guy named Jonathan Pollard. He was an American intelligence analyst And he was directed by Israeli intelligence, by an Israeli intelligence officer in the embassy of Israel in Washington, D.C., to basically steal the crown jewels of American intelligence. It's the Bible that has all of the frequencies that we collect upon in the SIGINT world. These are frequencies that are developed over years, painstakingly. If the enemy finds out that we know what a frequency is, they change it, and then it's no good. This is the Bible that said this is what each frequency did, how it's encrypted, how we've defeated the encryption, the whole works. Scores of American lives were lost gathering this information. I just want to remind, this is the Cold War when we had C-130s get brought down over Armenia. They were doing a SIGINT track. We had other aircraft go down collecting this data.
Right. When you say SIGINT, this is government talk for signals intelligence.
Signals intelligence. And basically, Pollard took this book and gave it to the Israelis. Then the Israelis took this book and gave it to the Soviets in exchange for getting beneficial immigration policy out of the Soviet Union. So basically, they gave the Soviets the Bible on how we collect intelligence against Soviet SIGINT. It damaged American national security. The Israelis did that. The FBI will tell you that the number one collector of intelligence.
I thought he just said Israel would never be allowed to do anything to damage U.S. national security. Didn't he just say that earlier? And then he just contradicted himself. Israel damaged U.S. national security, and the U.S. did nothing but kick their ass and say, what can you do some more? We ain't going to bring up the U.S.'s liberty. But you see, he just contradicted himself. He just said the U.S. would never allow Israel to harm its national security. Then he tell us about how they sold us out to the Soviets. Come on, Scott. Because Israel could do whatever they want to the United States because they control it.
Against the American target in the United States is Israel, not Russia, not Iran, not China, Israel. Israel's the greatest threat to American security. Israel only cares about Israel. They don't care about us. They only act on their benefit. They view us as a tool to benefit them. So Israel is not an ally of the United
States. After 9/11, Benjamin Netanyahu said America is a great big calf waiting to be carved up. That's what he said, a quote. And they laugh. They laugh and they giggle. But yeah, we control Israel.
United States. Israel is not a friend of the United States. Israel uses the United States like a parasite uses a host.
What became of Pollard?
He was supposed to be in jail for life and rot and die in an American prison.
Happened?
But the pro-Israeli law.
He didn't want to bring that up. And you know what? Judge Andrew Napolitano know what he just did. I want you to understand what Scott did. Scott was never going to bring up Pollard because if it serves me right, Donald Trump pardoned him, and he went back to Israel when Trump. If it serves, if my memory is correct, when Trump was in office the first time, he let that man go back to Israel. Trump, I think, this man who he said damaged U.S. national security. He said it, and that was the truth. I believe Trump pardoned that man and sent that man back to Israel in his first term, I think.
Lobby put pressure on. Netanyahu called him an Israeli hero. Again, a friend of America, calling a man who stole the crown jewels, gave them to Israel, sold it to the Soviets. He's a hero. So we pardoned him. We released him, and he's living out his life in Israel as a hero of Israel. One of the greatest traitors of America ever had is a hero of Israel.
You talking about we pardoned him? Who is we? Now you French all of a sudden, Scott? You French all of a sudden. I thought you just said that the Israeli lobby can't tell Donald Trump what to do. They absolutely told him to pardon Pollard, the man who you said harmed us, our national security, more than anybody else. They forced Trump's hand and sent that man back to Israel, a national hero. So you got to know this type of details. Deal with people.
When the Trump doubled down on his announcement about owning the Gaza Strip, not a single country on the planet supported him, but perhaps the harshest denunciation came from the Saudis, who are usually rather guarded in the public language that they use. They refer to the proposal or to Trump. It's unclear whether they're calling the proposal extremist or Trump extremist, but they used the word extremist twice in a 2-paragraph statement. How significant is that?
I mean, on the surface, it's a very significant thing, but let's just remind everybody that Donald Trump and Saudi Arabia, collaborated during his first term to bring about the Abrams Accords. And the Abrams Accords were a series of agreements that would lead to the normalization of relations between Israel and the Gulf Arab states to create an environment conducive to business. And Saudi Arabia and Israel were ready to normalize relations on October 6th of 2023. Because of the Hamas attack against Israel on October 7th, that didn't happen. But at the time, Saudi Arabia is willing to sell Palestine down the road, had already sold Palestine down the road, had created the conditions that there wouldn't be a Palestinian state. So let's not pretend that Saudi Arabia is suddenly now a born-again champion of the Palestinian cause. What's happened is that Israel has made it almost impossible for Saudi Arabia to go back to that deal because of the genocide that was carried out against the Palestinians in Gaza, and the fact that the world has rejected that. The Arab street has turned against it. So this is about domestic Saudi politics more than it is about suddenly the Saudis growing a conscience. I think what Trump is going to work on next is getting the Saudis to help underwrite the cost of rebuilding Gaza, to get them to chip in into whatever counter proposal ends up being put out there. But the idea that Saudi Arabia is now a strong, hard, fast supporter of the Palestinian cause is absurd. We saw that the Saudis, the senior members of the Saudi government have come out condemning Hamas, speaking out against Hamas. The Saudis secretly would love to see the Palestinians removed from Gaza because that would disenfranchise Hamas. Politically, they can't do it. So I think there's more to the Saudi posturing than meets the eye.
Oh, who commuted the sentence of Jonathan Pollard? Was it Donald Trump?
I'd have to go back. It might have been Donald Trump.
What?
Yeah,
Man,
because I know,
bro, stop, man. Come on, bro. Come on. Who believe he don't know that? And Andrew Napolitano, good. Stay on his ass. I think Andrew know what I know. Something ain't right about you, Scott. We are who commuted it? Dang, I gotta look that up. So you know everything else about the man, but you don't know. He said we pardoned him. Who? Was it Biden or was it Trump? Easy question. You know who it was, bro. But you said he don't want to say Trump because whoever pardoned him was manipulated by the Zionists. He just said Trump would never be manipulated by the Zionists. We saying that's bullshit.
under Barack Obama that a lot of pressure was put on Obama to do this, but that the Department of Justice and the intelligence community came in and said, no, this would be a huge insult to us. And I think it was Donald Trump that commuted the sentence of Jonathan Pollard.
How does the Kremlin view the genocide in Gaza and now this off-the-wall proposal for the United States to own it?
Look, they reject it. I mean, the Russians have been very much against Israel's actions in Gaza. Russia has sought, if you remember, it was the Russians that initiated the process of bringing 14 Palestinian factions together, including Hamas, to create a political singularity that would undermine American and Israeli objections to Hamas, being the government in Gaza. The idea was to recreate the government, rename it, and have Hamas play a supporting role, not the leading role. Russia initiated that. Then the Chinese picked it up because there's some complexity in the Russian Middle East posture. Remember, Russia was in Syria. Russia was opposing Iranian expansion into Syria. Russia was greenlighting Israeli bombing of Syria, and so it was a complicated situation for the Russians to take the lead. But the Russians likewise are not supportive of Donald Trump's policies. But what can Russia do? Russia can only speak out, formulate policy, continue to do diplomacy behind the scenes. But the Russians aren't the heavy hitters in the region that people might think they are. They are heavily beholden to Israel, and they have their own pro-Israeli lobby. Many of the Russian oligarchs, these billionaires that are the secret power behind the Russian economy, are dual citizens with Israel. And so Russia has an Israeli problem, just like the United States has an Israeli problem.
They don't control Russia.
Before I aggravate Maverick any longer, what is your latest understanding of the situation in Ukraine? Is the pipeline of military equipment still flowing, American military equipment still flowing to Kyiv?
The money that was allocated by the Biden administration, what's left of that continues to flow. There was no way the Biden administration was going to squeeze that tube of toothpaste clean before they left. And that money hasn't been stopped by the Trump administration. Indeed, there's been, for instance, the transfer of Patriot batteries back to Raytheon to be refurbished before moving on back to Ukraine, the transfer of 90 missiles, Patriot missiles. This, I think, is even an addition too. So there is this flood, but the United States is no longer the lead coordinator. We've backed out of the Ramstein coordination group. NATO now has the lead. I think it's the British have the lead on that, and Europe just simply can't do this job. It's the whole thing about the military supply line into Ukraine is collapsing as we speak. They're able to put in spurts in here, but what Ukraine needs is a fire hose, not a garden hose, and they don't have the fire hose anymore. And the other thing is that the Ukrainians, their manpower situation is collapsing on a daily basis. I mean, Zelensky came out with an interesting comment, which is the truth. He says we can't have presidential elections, because if we have presidential elections, we'll have to suspend military operations. And the moment we suspend military operations, our army ceases to exist. Everybody will flee the front. There's a huge desertion problem right now. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian troops are fleeing. If you recruit 10 soldiers and send them to the front line, 6 of those are going to desert within a day. And then the others are going to surrender to the Russians, and those that don't surrender die. This is the reality. Ukraine's manpower situation is a crisis that can't be resolved. So, it doesn't matter if we keep sending equipment in. There's nobody to operate it, and there's no structure to employ it properly. It just is, wheat and grist for the grinder.
Right. How much longer can Ukraine last?
According to Budanov, the head of their intelligence, Ukraine will cease to exist by the summer of 2025. Now, that could be an exaggeration designed to, scare the West, but the fact is the Ukrainians are in a lot of trouble. The longer the peace, the longer they delay implementation of what will be a surrender, the more territory they'll lose, the more manpower they'll lose, and the greater the collapse will be. I don't think Ukraine survives this year, but I didn't think Ukraine was going to survive 2024. It's again, in the end of the day, it's up to the Russians to decide, how much pressure they want to put on Ukraine. The more pressure Russia puts on Ukraine from a military standpoint, the more Russian soldiers die. And from Putin's perspective, and I believe this was articulated in a conversation with Donald Trump, the Russians aren't in the mode of let's kill as many Russian soldiers as possible. I think the Russians realize they've won this war, and what they need to do is just continue to put pressure on Ukraine, but in a manner which minimizes Russian casualties. And we're talking about minimizing Russian casualties in a high intensity conflict, situation, which means there's going to be significant casualties no matter what.
Scott Ritter, a pleasure, my dear friend. Thank you very much for you.
Like anyone is. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another video. One day after the ultimatum of Donald Trump for Hamas that they need to hand in all of the Israeli prisoners of war in Gaza on Saturday, otherwise they will face hell. It doesn't seem like anyone is taking the tensions down, and things are escalating even further, at least when it comes to the statements. Apart from the statements, things are happening behind closed doors as well, and more revelations are coming that are very dangerous when it comes to the escalation, not only between Israel and Hamas, but also between Israel and Egypt and other states as well. However, we're going to start off with the West Bank. Today, there was a revelation in Haaretz newspaper that the Central Command in the Israeli army, they started to give new orders for the Israeli terrorists inside the West Bank. What are these orders? These orders are very similar to what they gave them in Gaza. Shoot to kill. Shoot everyone, even if they're not a suspect, anyone working in the fields, any farmer, anyone walking, because they might be planting a bomb, they might be doing something. This is leading to an increased death toll when it comes to the civilian population. Today, another female was killed by an Israeli planted bomb next to her house, on her door, without telling the house owners. She was killed and her father was critically wounded. Yesterday, a pregnant woman was killed. More and more barbarism coming from Israel, destruction of roads for no reason whatsoever in Jenin and other parts of the West Bank. And these things are happening now at an increased level without adequate coverage for the suffering of the people. Over 50,000 people were forcibly expelled from Jenin. You're talking about things that are similar to the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, with the reports of Donald Trump now that he wants to displace the Palestinians and send them to so many countries, but primarily Jordan and Egypt. Which leads me to Jordan. The Jordanian king, he had a visit to the United States during which he met with Donald Trump. Donald Trump was again reiterating about the importance that Jordan would take in some Palestinians that would be displaced from Gaza. However, the Jordanian king did not have a very clear approach when it comes to the plan of Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, he was complimenting him, saying that, you know, he's a man that can bring peace and we need to stand by him. When it comes to accepting Palestinians, he confirmed that they're able to take 2,000 Palestinian children, but with relation to the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians altogether, from Gaza, he said that we need to see what Egypt has to say and what the Arab states have to say as well. This is a very important thing here. This is a very important development. The Egyptian president received an invitation to visit the United States by Donald Trump. He received this invite alongside the King of Jordan. The King of Jordan is there. The Egyptian president refused to visit the United States. These are the reports that are coming now. However, his foreign minister went there a few days back. His foreign minister went and met with Marco Rubio, during which he said that we need to work on rebuilding Gaza, but rebuilding Gaza with the people inside it. And according to reports, Egypt proposed two plans for the American side to rebuild Gaza with the population inside it. And they're showing outright rejection when it comes to the United States plan to expel the Palestinian population and give them a piece of land in Egypt, give them a piece of land in Jordan, and in other places too. But this is something that did not happen previously, especially with the relations between Egypt and the United States. An Egyptian president receiving an invitation and him rejecting it outright. This is leading to an escalation. There's very much heat involved now in the relations between Egypt and the United States, let alone with Egypt and Israel. How is that translating on the ground? On the ground, it's translating with increased presence of Egyptian forces in the Sinai Peninsula. Not only Egyptian presence, now we had a revelation from Egypt that they had a massive drill for their armed forces in Rafah, You're talking about a drill next to the Gaza borders. That means it's also close to the Israeli borders. And this is not the first drill coming by Egypt. This is one of many drills that happened in Sinai, but now they're getting closer to the borders with Gaza and the borders with Israel. And this is raising concerns with the Israeli side to a level where they're raising it with Egypt as well. So in the previous round of negotiations, when the Israeli delegation went to Egypt, they spoke about all of the options when it comes to Gaza, displacing the population, the next phases of the ceasefire, what's going to happen. But one of the key things that they mentioned in that meeting was the fact that why are you having so many forces inside of Sinai? What's happening? You have heavy equipment inside of Sinai, and well, what's the deal exactly? And the response that came from the Egyptian side was even more concerning for the Israelis. They said that any breach of the agreement will be met with an Egyptian breach. An agreement of the Camp David Accords, the agreement when it comes to Gaza. This was following a statement and talks about the withdrawal of Israel from the Philadelphia corridor. The agreement states that on day 50, with the ceasefire, whether we're already in phase 2 or if we are ending with phase 1 and there's a delay and we're going into phase 2, Israel has to withdraw on day 50, whether or not we have a phase 2. And Israel is being shady about that, especially now with the backing of Donald Trump. Egypt told them any breach from your end will be met with an Egyptian breach. That is leading to an escalation with the United States as well. Not only is the Egyptian president refusing to go and meet Donald Trump in the United States, which indicates a massive problem between the United States and Egypt, and an outright refusal of Egypt for the plan of the United States to displace the Palestinian people. This is leading Donald Trump to actually consider sanctions when it comes to Egypt. He was asked about the possibility of sanctions if the Egyptian side refuses to have this.
The Egyptian president not stupid. He can be assassinated for that. Sadat was assassinated for even signing the Camp David Accords and being friends with Israel. They already had a president assassinated for this type of bullshit. He already know any agreement to displace the Palestinians, he will be assassinated.
Agreement implemented when it comes to the Palestinians, and he said yes, that's on the table, but Egypt already has a plan. That's the thing that people need to understand. Egypt already faced this since 2008, and in recent years they had threats to remove the military aid that they get every year. That led them to diversify and have dealings with other countries too. Egypt can simply go to China and Russia and cover the gap that they're facing with the United States, because 1 billion, just 1.3 billion when it comes to Egypt and its economy are not that massive when it comes to big numbers. Egypt is a very large country. And the problem is that Donald Trump is not only threatening with the cutting of the aid. Donald Trump is referring again to the Egyptian president as the general. So in his statements and his approach towards Egypt and its president, he is actually trying to strip the legitimacy of the Egyptian president. This could mean that we're not only talking about stopping the aid here, it's about having sanctions, not just cutting aid, having sanctions, something very significant if you want to play with financial problems when it comes to Egypt. But again, Egypt clearly has a plan B that they are willing to accept. And that's why they are still moving ahead with their position to refuse the displacement of the Palestinian people. This is a pillar when it comes to the foreign policy of Egypt, and now they're reiterating it. And although Egypt as a country, they only want to solve things in general in a diplomatic manner, politically, through negotiations, they are seeing that there's a side here in the United States that is acting like a bully and escalating and trying to impose his will on everyone. Which leads us to this side. Donald Trump has been making contradictory statements. Firstly, he said we're going to buy Gaza. And then he said we're going to control Gaza. Today he's saying we're going to control Gaza, but without buying Gaza. Before that, he said we're not going to send troops in. And now he's saying we're going to implement hell. What does he mean by hell? And how can he have so many contradicting statements all at once when it comes to Gaza? Either buy or control, either you send forces or you don't send forces. What are you threatening exactly with? These indications and these statements from Donald Trump indicate that the man is not entirely sure of his sayings. The man is not entirely sure from what he's talking about, and his proposals, it's clearly unsubstantiated. And we're listening to someone with open threats like that, who's getting offended by the approach of Hamas. And we're seeing a visible and clear message coming from the United States and Israel that reflect the level of frustration of the Hamas position. You're talking about arrogant powers, and they are threatened by a small group inside of Gaza. Can you comprehend that? Gaza, this small, tiny place that has been bombarded for the past 15 months, is taking a strong position when it comes to the ceasefire and when it comes to the United States. This shows you how small the United States is and how small Israel is in comparison to Gaza. Yes, Gaza might be small in terms of size and the people destroyed, they're not that capable in terms of power. But these positions leading the US president to be so frustrated to a level where he today said, oh, Hamas, they're acting like bullies and it's not going to work. And they're going to see when all hell breaks loose. They're acting like bullies. The only one acting like a bully is himself, acting like a bully against everyone, not just the Palestinian side. So all of that is very important. But there are people in Israel who believe that this is just a move coming from Hamas to add to the pressure so that Israel can comply. And some figures in Israel and many analysts in Israel are saying that the problem actually lies from the Israeli side. We're having so many problems with the statements of Benjamin Netanyahu. The statement of Donald Trump are not helping. And their analysis is saying they know that Hamas is having this move because Israel is not intending to go into phase 2. So from their perspective, they're blaming Netanyahu for the Hamas move, his public statements about continuing the war and the breaches of the ceasefire. And the result is Hamas is understanding Israel does not have an intent to move on with phase 2. Therefore, why should I release more prisoners to them? This is their line of thinking. And this is what the Israeli analysis is saying, and multiple analysts inside of Israel are saying. So clearly some of them are seeing what's happening. However, Benjamin Netanyahu is continuing with his tone. And again, with the tone of Benjamin Netanyahu and with some of the statements that are coming from Israel, many of them have contradictions. Netanyahu is saying if they don't release prisoners on Saturday, we're going back to a full-scale war up until we have a decisive strike on Hamas. Prisoners, not all of them, like Donald Trump stated. And then we're going to continue up until we eliminate Hamas and have a decisive attack against Hamas. Then conflicting reports coming from his office is that no, actually Hamas might release all of them before Saturday. Other statements saying that no, 2 or 3 might be released on Saturday and then we're going to see the release of the rest. Clearly some of the statements are trying to please the Israeli public, applying pressure to go ahead with the ceasefire agreement so that all of the Israeli prisoners of war can be released. And other statements are trying to remain shady so that they can apply pressure on Hamas so that Hamas can actually believe that, hold on a second, we are actually going to face an Israel war. And from Hamas's perspective, they are not bothered by the Israeli statements or the statements of Donald Trump. Hamas reiterated again, no one will force us out of our land. This is our land here, and these threats are not worrying us. As a matter of fact, they also has a statement saying the plan to expel the people of Gaza will not succeed and will be met with a united Palestinian, Arab, and Islamic position as well. The tone of Hamas when it comes to the position of Arab and Muslim states has been to a very large extent critical during the genocide for the lack of enough action coming from the Arab and Muslim countries to support Gaza. Now they're speaking with a more confident tone. Why is the confident tone? Clearly, they're saying that these threats of Donald Trump are bringing the Arab states together, are causing frictions between the United States and Egypt and Jordan and even Saudi Arabia too. And they know that they will have a backing if Israel continues the genocide inside of Gaza. Who do they have a backing from? Well, they have the basic support from Ansar Allah and from other resistance fronts, and also Iran. We're going to talk about that in a second. But before that, there's an Arab summit that's going to take place in Cairo at the request of Egypt. All of the Arab countries are going to be present, including Syria too. They're going to be discussing a position, having a position against the United States and its plan to expel the population of Gaza. Many outcomes can come out of this summit. So far, the Arab summits have been nothing but condemnation, and we condemn and we ask the international community and this and that. However, there have been more strong statements recently from multiple Arab states that indicate we could be seeing a stronger position. Could this stronger position from the Arab countries indicate any moves, any actions that they can take? Probably. If not, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be problematic for the Egyptian position, and it's going to be problematic for them, because then Donald Trump will view it as a case of, hold on a second, I can bully them and they will submit to my will, no problem. So the Arab states must take a very strong position to stop this arrogance coming from Israel and from the United States. When it comes to Ansar Allah made two very important statements today. One of them was from the government of Ansar Allah, and the other one was from Abdul Malik al-Houthi, the leader of Ansar Allah. What did he say? He said, Mr. Trump, you ignorant fool, the honorable people of Gaza will not sell their homeland. The hand is on the trigger if the enemy breaks its promise in Gaza or Lebanon. The hand is on the trigger when it comes to Ansar Allah, meaning that once Israel begins the war again in Gaza, and this time they also said in Lebanon too, our hand is on the trigger. Based on the previous actions from Ansar Allah, we're expected to see immediate action. What action? To what extent? This is where the clarification came from the government of Ansar Allah in Yemen. They said any aggression on the Gaza Strip will be met with Palestinian steadfastness and Yemeni escalation on all possible levels. If you recall, during the genocide, Ansar Allah in Yemen had multiple phases to the escalation. They had phase 1, 2, 3, 4, up until we reached phase 5. And they escalated in terms of the geographical scope of attacks. They escalated with the weapons that they used. They escalated with the targets, and they escalated with the quantity and consistency of attacks. Up until we were facing attacks on every day on Israel, hypersonic, ballistic missiles, drones, and cruise missiles, modified cruise missiles, everything. They shut down Eilat port. Eilat port declared bankruptcy because of Ansar Allah. Ansar Allah expelled 4 US aircraft carriers. These terror aircraft carriers that go there to bully everyone across the world. Ansar Allah in Yemen expelled 4 of them. And if Ansar Allah in Yemen did that, and that's a very dangerous risk for the coming period too, especially when it comes to the genocide coalition, because for the past few weeks since the ceasefire, the ships were moving normally. The United States, Britain, other countries too. Are they going to go into a position where they go back to attacks from Ansar Allah. This is not just about Israel, but this shows you the extent that these countries go to protect this genocidal entity, especially Donald Trump, who's being mocked now all across social media. Where is your America first? So far, since you began your term, we've seen nothing but Israel first. Submitting to the Zionist demands, acting more Israeli than the most fierce Zionist, becoming a bootlicker for Benjamin Netanyahu, all sorts of stuff, and that's visible. That clearly signals that they prefer Israel to their own interests. The foreign aid, the support for Israel, billions when people are dying in the streets of hunger and homeless people, and with the national disasters that the United States face, the people don't get a fraction of what's being sent to a genocidal entity massacring people. All of that is visible to the American population before other populations too. However, what they need to know is that their country's foreign policy is going to have more implications against them. And it's not going to only be from Yemen. Although there is a ceasefire that is taking place in Lebanon, and it appears to be that it's looking towards a solution, nothing has been concluded yet. And Israel could be giving Hezbollah a reason to finally and completely breach this ceasefire agreement. What are they doing now? Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly asked Donald Trump to grant him more time when it comes to Lebanon. We spoke about an extension. That extension was clearly accepted. Israel withdrew from more territories, but now they're telling Trump, listen, give us some more time. The Lebanese army, they haven't deployed everywhere we need them to be deployed, and we need to control 5 strategic locations in Lebanon so that we don't face a threat from Hezbollah. They were given already an extension up until the 18th, but now they're saying we need an extension without specifying a time. What does that mean? That means they want to stay there for indefinitely, for as long as possible. If Donald Trump gives Benjamin Netanyahu that extension, the message to the Lebanese would be nothing is going to work with these people. No extension, no understanding, nothing. You're talking with people who don't honor and respect any agreements. That's been visible in Lebanon. That has been visible in Gaza. No one talks about the breaches of the murderers, of the terrorists in Israel. The only thing they talk about is a responsive measure coming from the Palestinian side. They always support the criminal, and anytime the victim does anything, they become loudmouths against them, and they commit every crime under the sun against them. So that could be an excuse for Lebanon. Okay, that's it. That could also create tensions on a geopolitical scale, and also create tensions with Iran. Iran could be the main player when it comes to the threat on Israel if the ceasefire is breached, and if it's seen as the United States supporting Israel fully, not only by words, but also by actions on the ground. Because there's an argument that Donald Trump now, he's having these statements so far. We need to see the actions on the ground. The comments that he's speaking, his statements, his tone, all of that is something dangerous that should be responded to, because actions can turn into words. So there must be a retaliation and a response to any statements, whether or not that man making the statements is intending to go ahead with them or using them as leverage. However, from an Iranian perspective, they're going to see how things are playing on the ground. If things on the ground are playing at their favor, at Israel and the United States' favor, and Israel breaks the ceasefire, and all of a sudden they go again on a genocide in Gaza and also breach everything when it comes to Lebanon, we can start talking again about urgent action being taken. Iran has a pending response. Iran told everyone across the whole world that they will be responding to the Israeli attack with a true Promise 3. And they said that that response will be stronger than the previous responses. The Iranian president later on said, if they stop murdering children, i.e. if we have a ceasefire, if things de-escalate, we might consider the intensity of the response. However, judging on the Iranian actions recently, they're giving it time when it comes to the ceasefire. If Israel and the United States break the ceasefire, they're giving Iran every excuse under the sun to go on a full-blown attack on Israel. Why? This time, from an Iranian perspective, it's going to be viewed as an Iranian national security thing and an attack against Iranian interests. From an Iranian side, they had what's labeled as a ring of fire on Israel, with the resistance in Gaza, with the resistance in Lebanon, but they lost an ally in Syria. And they had many disputes when it comes to Syria, whether or not they should be supporting the previous government of Assad. And now they're trying to open communication channels, but they consider that something very serious. If Israel goes on an all-out attack again on Gaza and on Lebanon, that would be detrimental for Iran. Iran can't afford to lose more allies in the region, and they already have the excuse of an Israeli attack on them. They already said we will attack in the appropriate time, in the right time, when it's suitable for them. Now could be the perfect time for them to attack. Why? Because now the United States created more hostilities with Arab states too. That means Iran wouldn't necessarily have as much as a hostile position that they had before when it comes to attack on Israel. This time, the United States is at odds with many Arab states. This time, you're facing more escalation from Egypt. You're facing US pressure on Jordan and on Arab countries as well. All of that will make life easier for Iran, who are already on the path of reconciliation with some of the Arab states and ending hostilities. They've had the 23 agreement with Saudi Arabia, brokered by China and Oman. All of that is important. So Donald Trump, by his moves, he is directly contributing to this new reality that is being shaped in the Middle East, that is bringing all of the countries together. The question remains, will he continue with his plans, and will he implement the threats that he's talking about, or are these just statements and threats that are empty, and at the end of the day, we will see a continuation of the ceasefire in Gaza?
Sundus and her 8-month fully formed unborn baby are, of course, only two of the hundreds of thousands of people who have been murdered by Benjamin Netanyahu and his murder gang in Tel Aviv. I highlight them for two reasons. First of all, because it's only just happened in the last few hours, and secondly, because it was in the West Bank. The October 7th incursion, of course, came from Gaza. It had nothing to do with the West Bank. Hamas don't rule the West Bank, and Sundus and her unborn baby definitely had nothing to do with Hamas. And therefore, underscored in this little mass murder in the Holy Land is the obvious point. This did not begin on October the 7th, and this is not about Hamas. There is not an Israel-Hamas war. The media are lying to you about that. They have been lying to you about it all along. I ask you never to forget that the President of the United States of America, Joe Biden, claimed on air, in public, to the world, that he had just seen pictures of beheaded babies on October the 7th. It was a gigantic lie, a bright, shining lie. The propagandists who pervade it across the world were lying. The mass media is still lying to you all day, every day. They don't even report, not one single outlet in the mass media in the world has reported what I've just told you about Sundus and her 8-month-old unborn baby. Not one person in the power structures of Western countries will talk about it. They are all engaged in a gigantic lie. This much you know. What you don't know, and I don't know, is why. Why is the entire world political system in the West, why is it so bent and twisted in defense of a genocidal country of 8 million people, millions of whom are third-class citizens with no rights of any kind at all? I've known apartheid, Mr. Elon Musk. I was in apartheid South Africa, undercover for the African National Congress. I gave my blood on the floor of the police station in Guguletu Township in Cape Town, South Africa. I mean, I literally gave my blood. And I was accompanied every step of the way and under the leadership of brave Jewish fighters against apartheid in South Africa. So don't tell me that Jews are in any way necessarily supporters of apartheid. Because I give you Joe Slovo, I give you Ruth First, I give you Albie Sachs, I give you Dennis Goldberg, I give you Ronnie Castros, I give you Max Coleman, I give you Audrey Coleman, I give you their sons who drove me around. This genocidal apartheid state in Israel is exactly the same in every particular, except it is worse than the apartheid system in South Africa. And I'm not going to stand by while Donald Trump and Elon Musk begin what can only be described as a genocidal attempt to bring down the Republic of South Africa because some guy sang a song about killing farmers, killing Boers. What does that have to do with the government of South Africa? What does that have to do with Cyril Ramaphosa? What does that have to do with the South African coalition government? I'll tell you what it has to do. South Africa was the country that brought the case of genocide against Israel in front of the International Criminal Court, in front of the International Court of Justice, the highest court in the world. That's why they've launched a war of words at the moment against South Africa. And only that. It's not because they care about the Boers. Let me be clear. I'm against killing farmers. I'm against killing Boers. I'm against killing whites, just as much as I was against killing blacks under apartheid in South Africa. Can the critics of South Africa today say the same? Somebody asked me, how do you feel about people killing white farmers in South Africa? I said exactly the same way that I cared and felt about the killing of the black children at Sharpeville, about the killing of the black children in Soweto. How about you? I asked, and answer came there, none, because they, of course, said nothing against apartheid until it was time for apartheid to be ditched. The United States of America took Nelson Mandela off the international terrorist list in 2008, 18 years after his release from Pollsmoor prison, later Pollsmoor Hospital. The British and American government supported apartheid right up until the bitter end. So the last people in the world entitled to talk about South Africa and racism are the British and American governments. Now that I've got that off my chest, let me turn to Ukraine. I've just read in the last few minutes, I was reading it while I was waiting to come on air, about a split which has occurred inside the American government over how they're going to actually implement the election promise that Donald Trump made, that he was going to bring an end to the war in Ukraine. It's the only basis on which people like me preferred him over Kamala Harris. But when does it start, President Trump? Apparently, you spoke with President Putin today. Did you tell him that your special appointee to Ukraine and Russia to bring about the end of the war, did you tell him that he is pushing for the resignation of President Putin? Good luck with that. Do any of you seriously think that the one who's going to resign is President Putin? Seriously? He's the most popular Russian leader since Joseph Stalin in the Second World War. Putin has the support of more than 80% of the Russian people. And the Russians have paid a gigantic price in blood and treasure to liberate their co-religionists, to liberate their Russian compatriots in the eastern part of Ukraine from 10 years of violence and mass murder against them. 14,000 Eastern Ukrainians, Russian people in Eastern Ukraine, trapped there by the vagaries of boundaries in the Soviet period, were systematically reduced. Their children murdered. Their old people slaughtered in their homes. Their trade unionists in Odessa burned to death deliberately in a burning trade union building. Do you think Russia has done all this? Do you think Russia has expended all this in international ostracism, sanctions, treasure, in the hundreds of billions, and the blood of so many of their soldiers and civilians? Do you think Russia's done all this so that Donald Trump can demand the resignation of Vladimir Putin as a condition of bringing about a ceasefire? Let me tell you, if that's your demand, there will be no ceasefire in Ukraine. The war will continue until the Russian armed forces are in the center of Kiev, appointing a government of their own. You said you were the anti-war leader, Donald Trump. You said you'd bring about an end to the war in Gaza, only to declare that you were now the ruler of Gaza and the Palestinians now had to get out and never come back. You said you would bring about an end to the war in Ukraine. And now these are your demands for a ceasefire, a freezing of the conflict on a North-South Korea basis with British troops policing a demilitarized zone in between them. Are you serious? Do you know the history of Russia and Britain? Have you ever heard of the Crimean War? Have you ever heard of the War of Intervention? Have you ever heard of the 108,000 British soldiers that invaded Russia to reverse the Russian Revolution between 1918 and 1922? Do you know anything about any of these things? Do you think Russia is going to allow British soldiers along the demilitarized zone between Russia and Ukraine? Are you crazy, Donald Trump? I asked this on Wednesday. And I'm genuinely telling you that I'm beginning seriously to question, if not your, then the mental health of the people you have appointed around you to advise you on these two great conflicts of our time, in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon, with Iran, and of course, the potentially existential conflict in the Ukraine. We'll be talking to a man in a minute that used to be described as the last Arab.
Well, it might come as a shock to learn that the CIA has been lying about President Kennedy's assassination. I know it's shocking, right?
It only took however many years to be able to say that, Clayton.
Out loud. I know, it's crazy. All in an effort, of course, to block the American people from knowing what happened on that day. Well, this week, suddenly, out of the blue, the FBI has just discovered 2,400 new JFK documents, 14,000 pages. Timing is amazing. Comes just a few weeks after President Trump asked for a full release of all JFK documents related to the murder. Well, the man we wanted to ask to come on, who knows arguably more about this than anyone in the United States, has written a book about this. The man who killed Kennedy: The Case Against LBJ, and that is Roger Stone. Roger Stone, welcome into the show. Great to see you again, my friend.
Good to be back with you.
So what do you make, first of all, before we get to what you expect to see in these documents, the full release here once President Trump signs off on that, and Tulsi Gabbard being in there, et cetera. But this new revelation, 2,400 new JFK documents, 14,000 pages. The timing strikes me as odd, first of all. Does it strike you that way?
Well, it's far worse than that, because really it's just the tip of the iceberg. You see, all of the relevant documents pertaining to John F. Kennedy's murder did not go into the JFK assassination documents archive. It's available in a number of other places and other agencies. Those documents are not included. So the president could broaden his order to say all documents in possession of any federal agency. And then if we're serious, and the president is quite serious about examining the documents pertaining to the death of Senator Robert Kennedy, who was murdered while running for president on the evening he won the California primary, or Dr. Martin Luther King, well, we need to have the Los Angeles Police Department's records and the Memphis, Tennessee records, as well as the records from the Dallas Police Department and the Dallas Sheriff's Office. The president's committed to full disclosure, but the bureaucrats are always going to play these games, hiding documents here and there. Congressman Steve Cohen, a Democrat from Tennessee, explaining where various places the documents could be hidden, and urging him to set up someone as a liaison to ensure that every single document is ultimately declassified and made available to the American people. But the president's order called for a plan. We're supposed to have a plan by now. He gave them 15 days. We've still seen no public plan. Once we see that, we'll see if it's adequate to uncover all that which is covered.
Well, obviously, our show is called Redacted because usually the things that are redacted are the things that we want to know about. So what do you think will be redacted? How much of it do you think that those juicy details that the public wants and is in the public interest to know at this point will be hidden from us under redactions?
Well, look, I think if you go back and look at the history of this, it tells you a lot. The law mandating the release of all of the JFK assassination documents was passed in the late 90s. The date turned out to be 2017. So this decision came to President Donald Trump whether he should declassify the documents. In the end, he decided to declassify about 80% of them. We learned all kinds of things that we didn't know about Kennedy's assassination. For example, there's a memo from J. Edgar Hoover to President Lyndon Johnson saying, "Sir, our sources tell you the KGB, their Russian intelligence agency, has conducted their own independent investigation, and they concluded that you, sir, are the perp and working with several federal agencies." That was one of the things that was released. But the part that was held back at the behest of the Mike Pompeo, who was the CIA director. So it would be and his reasoning was that it would expose the methods and sources of the agency. Now, President Trump told me that it was Pompeo who talked him out of full disclosure. He also told Judge Andrew Napolitano, and then about 10 days ago, he told Sean Hannity. So that kind of tells you what piece is missing. If you understand the Kennedy assassination is a puzzle, while I maintain in my New York Times best-selling book that Lyndon Johnson is the drum major, he's calling the shots. He appoints himself to the secret black box subcommittee of the Defense Appropriations Committee. At the time, he's the Senate Majority Leader. Very rare for a majority leader to serve on any committee, but that's where the CIA's budget is controlled. In other words, Lyndon Johnson is the paymaster for the CIA. And very recently, I think it was Alex Jones, posted an audio that came from the great-grandson of Billy Sal Estes, one of Johnson's cronies, and the executive director of the Democrat National Committee, basically Johnson's chief political operative, in which they talk casually about the fact that Lyndon Johnson hired Malcolm Mac Wallace to kill John F. Kennedy. That is part of the story. That is part of the story. So we now have, and Wallace's fingerprints are found on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. There's multiple things tying Johnson to Wallace and Wallace to the assassination. The CIA's involvement is also clear. In other words, I'm not alleging that Johnson does this alone, but the CIA is angry at Kennedy over the Bay of Pigs because they believe that he made a mistake, not understanding that the plan that Kennedy approved for the invasion of the Bay of Pigs included air cover from 29 Panamanian flag bombers flown by Cuban pilots to protect the men storming the beaches. Kennedy only approved the plan for the Bay of Pigs on the condition that it looked like an indigenous Cuban uprising, not an invasion by the United States government. Unbeknownst to Kennedy, the CIA canceled that air cover the day before the invasion. The thing was, of course, a fiasco for which Kennedy suffered very badly politically. But it's just yet another example of their motives. They blame Kennedy because Curtis LeMay wanted to send in the U.S. Air Force, stamping this as the U.S. invasion Kennedy had never agreed to, and it was denied. The CIA also believes, and this is, we learned true, the great story about the Cuban Missile Crisis that you've been told, that Jack and Bobby faced down tough Nikita Khrushchev, who agreed to remove the missiles. That's not the whole story. 50 years later, when documents are declassified, we learned that they made a deal to remove NATO missiles, our missiles, from Italy and Turkey in return for a pledge by Castro to remove the missiles from Cuba, which included no on-site inspections. So the deep state, the military-industrial complex, they are very upset with John Kennedy. Kennedy was supporting a silver dollar. The banks didn't like that. They didn't want silver-backed money. Big oil is furious because Kennedy is trying to repeal the oil depletion allowance, costing them millions in taxes. These are all of the entities who are, and organized crime, of course, shouldn't leave them out. Remember, Joe Kennedy got the mob to give $1 million to John Kennedy's race for president. And in return, the Kennedy administration was supposed to drop deportation proceedings against Santo Trafficante, the mobster who ran Florida, and Carlos Marcello, who controlled the mob in Johnson's Texas, as well as in Louisiana. After Kennedy was elected, Bobby becomes Attorney General. Joe Kennedy suffers a stroke, so he can no longer keep the deal, and they go after both gangsters. That is their motivation. They are also involved in Kennedy's murder. So what I expect we're going to see here is the CIA piece. That is what they're hiding. But there are other things the government has that we need to know. But just to get everything out of the CIA, I think that would be a significant achievement. And the president's got to look at this more broadly. I spoke to him the other day and I said, this was great. Getting all of the data regarding all three assassinations, John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Dr. King. But I also told him he should release all documents pertaining to the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan. The government's never given us a full report. I'm writing a book on this subject now because there are many, many anomalies that are hard to understand. If John Hinckley Jr. is always in front of Reagan shooting upwards, which he is, there's 4 bullets, all of which are accounted for. Reagan was shot from above and behind, as you will see. So I'd like to get the government's records on this for my own selfish reasons. I want to finish this book, but there are many anomalies there. The president told me that it was a good idea and he would think about it.
I mean, there's still questions too. I see people recently, as soon as these files came out, asking about APEC and John F. Kennedy's move to try to have them register as a foreign agent in the United States.
Plus his interest
in the connections with Mossad and the nuclear program in Israel.
Exactly. That's, I think, the real issue. Israel wanted the nuke. JFK did not want them to have the nuke. Only days after Lyndon Johnson became president, they had approval to get the nuke. To get the nukes.
It's remarkable.
And
it's remarkable how
right
that
now
happens.
they have the nuke, and we pretend we don't know that they have the nuke.
I want to ask you before we let you go, Roger, on Representative Luna. We just heard from her pushing for this new JFK commission. She says what she's seen clearly shows that there's 2 shooters. First of all, do you trust the Congresswoman on this piece, and do you think this is going to be more whitewashing, or we'll get some actual answers from a House of Representatives commission?
I haven't seen the full context of what Congressman Luna said. A week ago, she had a bill to add Donald Trump to Mount Rushmore, and I strongly support her bill. Let me say that first. Secondarily, the president said that he would appoint a commission to examine all of these investigations. And at the time, he rather implied that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would head such a commission, although time-wise, even though Bobby's got a lot of energy, it'd be tough to be HHS secretary and head such a commission. But I think a commission's a very good idea. We should look at all these presidential assassinations, including the ones in Butler, Pennsylvania, and the one in West Palm Beach, as well as Reagan's, as I've discussed. And we should make sure we're learning everything there is to know about JFK, RFK, and MLK.
Yeah, 100%. And why stop there? Let's go back to McKinley. Let's go back to Abraham Lincoln too. You know, I mean, there's a lot of questions.
People don't realize this, but there was an attempt on Carter's life by Puerto Rican nationalists. There was an attempt on Gerald Ford's life, but we were told by a member of the Manson family that may actually be true. There was an attempt on Nixon's life in Miami, which got very little coverage, but you can find the documentation of it. So every modern president has had attempts on their life. When there's a foiled assassination, I'm not sure the government has always told us about it.
And the involvement of the Secret Service in Trump's Butler, Pennsylvania, and Mar-a-Lago. Roger Stone, great to see you as always.
Kofi, follow me.